by the way, are resources, tools. How many people read LaVoy's book? Show of hands.
Yeah.
How many have said they're going to read it and are going to read it? I've been telling Jeanette that ever since I met her, so for over 3 years now, I've been telling Jeanette I'm going to read his book. Last weekend, I was at a training with Chris Ann Hall and the bearded black cowboy, Steve Levinson, I think is his last name. And we were doing a phenomenal training, self-defense. We're going to do it again. It was so phenomenal. We're going to do it at the end of August or the beginning of September. So, and Chris Ann has put me in charge of it. So it's phenomenal. But anyway, on the plane ride back, I decided, okay, so coming into this weekend, the anniversary of LaVoy's murder, I said I'm going to read it before this weekend. On the plane, off the plane, as I was at different airports, back on the plane, I finished it in less than 2 days, because it's that good. And Jeanette was just telling me that LaVoy did not know about Agenda 21. He was just getting into it. And yet LaVoy's book covers so many things, as knowing what I do about United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, that as I'm reading the book, and just after this phenomenal self-defense training, that book has me looking at the world differently. Because there is a day coming where our energy sources are going to be limited if United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, gets fully implemented. And let me tell you, it is being implemented. Agenda 21 is simply the agenda for the 21st century, based on limited resources, so we're told. And the limited resources are food, energy, planet Earth itself, water, everything. Show of hands, how many have heard of it, United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development? Okay, put your hands down, please. How many have not heard of Agenda 21? Anybody not here? Okay, great. We have several people, at least 3 people have never heard of it. Thank you so much for listening to what I have to share today. For those of you who do know about Agenda 21, how many would say that you know it pretty darn well, that if you're at the airport, sorry, I'm being told, can you turn me down a little bit? Somebody's telling me I'm nervous and I'm the baby of the family, so it comes out really loud. As my friend Chris Ann says, she's got heat on her voice, so you may, sound guys, need to turn me down. You can't turn down my passion, though, and you'll hear that come out, too, today. So for those of you who know about Agenda 21, can you, at any moment, when somebody comes up and says, oh, but consensus says global warming is real, do you have a response for that? Okay. How many of you can logically answer, but the seas are rising, and how many of you have a defense for the seas rising? Not enough. I've gotten to a place in my studies that I can combat these comments, including 97% of scientists say that's a lie. That the seas are rising and Miami is going to be fully underwater? Lie. In fact, Al Gore's 10-year tipping points, which have already come and gone, all have been proven to be a lie. And yet the media and our politicians on the left and the right, they march forward as if all of this is true. This book just came out recently. It's called The Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change. And for those of you who want a response, and a good one based on true science, I invite you to get this book by my friend Mark Morano. It's phenomenal. In fact, it's available on Audible too. And when I came back from the last United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change conference that was in Poland in December, I got it on Audible and I could not stop listening to it for over 10 hours. Just like LaVoy's book, I could not put it down. So I invite you to get these. They're $20, and that way I don't have to have a bigger carbon footprint when I fly back to California. Also, so help me get rid of the weight of these. And also, so you can use it as a tool, but for every book, and I just pay cost. I don't, I'm not here to make money. That is not what I'm out to do. But I am here to contribute to Jeanette, the Finicums, and what LaVoy was up to, which was educating his fellow human beings because he saw dark clouds coming. And the dark clouds are here. They're here today. And thank goodness we are not 100% reliable, because on a day like this where there's no wind, or very little wind, and no sun, where are we going to get our energy from? If it's just wind and solar, tell me, weeks of winter, where do we get our energy from? I know my state, the state of California, is pushing for 100% renewable by the year 2045, wind and solar only. They don't even identify hydroelectric energy as part of the green mix, unlike the state of Washington. And so in my state, the state of California, is the largest dam destruction project in worldwide history. And just like this whole climate change, man is causing global warming, everything we do. The story of the climate, there are so many lies, just like what happened with LaVoy. There are so many lies on why those dams are supposedly coming out, and the coho salmon, that I have, for my life and the rest of my life, dedicated myself to the passion of truth. And I think LaVoy was one of those people too. He just wanted the truth. And that's what gets me around the world, going to many United Nations conferences. These are just some of my lanyards from their conferences. And so I want to share with you what I've learned about Agenda 21. The other thing that I like to do is see for myself. So what is happening? So we're hearing a lot about plastic in my state. They're trying to ban, I think they have banned plastic straws. I don't know when it's implemented. And for well over a year, we've had to buy plastic bags. So my next goal is to go to this so-called plastic ocean and see for myself what's really going on there. And I invite all of us, all of you, to do that too, so that you can own the information. You know, in LaVoy's book, he talks about being a mama bear. And he says, wherever his book is, he says, you do not have to be a mother to be a mama bear. And I so relate to that. I do not have children, and there's many times when I'm so grateful. I guess I didn't bring LaVoy's book up. Oh, here it is, right here in front of me. LaVoy says, that you don't have to be a mother bear in order to have your mother instincts. And I feel the same way. Our youth are being stolen. How? Through education. And so my mama bear, not having any children, has come out. And how dare you take our children? You guys, I'm getting lost here. Now I've lost my clicker. And children in the 21st century are being told that their grandfathers and their grandmothers and their parents have destroyed planet Earth. And now they're given the task to save planet Earth for all humanity. In fact, at the most recent United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change conference, COP24, Conventions of Party, that I just got back from, the children were there in record numbers. And I've been to many United Nations conferences around the world, but I've never seen a conference so full of children and young people. And what they were going around saying as you interviewed them was, in 12 years, remember Al Gore was in 10 years. Well now, and that's come and gone, the 10-year tipping point where we were going to see all this catastrophe to the earth that human beings might not be around anymore. This is no joke, this is what they say. Well now that 10 years is come and gone, and now it's 12 years. So the youth were going around saying, we only have 12 more years. And in 12 more years, life will be uninhabitable and unrecognizable based on man-made, anthropogenic global warming. Now, if you ask these kids, these young people, and even the older people, the scientists, the politicians who were there, can you tell me where you see this global warming happening, and can you prove to me it was caused by man? So what do you think they say? 97%, right? No, I want you, with your own two eyes, to tell me where you've seen this happen. And can you, and then I want you to, like, show me how man has done that. Do you know not one person can do that? It's amazing. And yet, at least I think half of the United States voting population believes them. And I think we're heading for a train wreck. My name is Bacigalupi, and in 2012 I ran for Congress in California, and my slogan was government on our side, not on our back. I helped create several films, Wolves in Government Clothing, about the wolf introductions. That was like back in 2012, I think. Blue, and No Water, No Farmer, No Food. Our next film was going to be about polar bears, but we didn't quite get there. I dressed up as a pig to a conference in California about a bill called Prop 1. It was our water bond bill in 2014. I even made the LA Times, that's me, because in that proposition it talked about sustainable development. It talked about water sustainability. It talked about removing fish barriers. When California is a drought-ridden state, it is a state that's on the map not because of its gold, but because of agriculture. And with agriculture and water and our ability to produce food, we were the breadbasket of the nation. Hollywood came, high-tech came, biotech came, and we have an economy that was, I think fifth largest economy. I don't know what it is now. They're still saying it's fifth based on renewable energy, and yet we see, and yet we see these solar, companies going bankrupt. So anyway, I dressed up as a pig to say that there was a lot of pork in Prop 1. And it had nothing to do, or everything to do with environmentalism, and nothing to do with creating more water for the state of California. In fact, it talked about removing fish barriers. What's a fish barrier? A dam. The largest dam destruction project in worldwide history is the one on the Klamath River, just north of my parents' ranch. And this is my parents' ranch. These are our Black Angus cows. That is my horse, Freedom. And guys, those are clouds. It's not methane gas. And no, methane gas is not the problem of global warming, climate change. So I've been to the United Nations 2012 conference, the Rio Plus 20, which was the 20-year anniversary of Agenda 21. And I also went to COP21 in 2015, the Paris Agreement, where President Obama signed the United States into the Paris Agreement. And by the way, how many hear that Trump took us out of the Paris Agreement? Do you know that that's not true? Legally, we are not out of the Paris Agreement until the day after the U.S. presidential 2020 election. Isn't that crafty? In fact, you can find out more about it in that book that I have, Mark Morano. He finally talks about it. So finally being, even people who know, we're still saying, yeah, we're out of the agreement. We're not. So, if you want to be out of the agreement, which the agreement, anybody know what the agreement is?
Cap and trade policies.
It is based on everything you're saying, sir. Thank you so much. As a human society, per the Paris Agreement, we all must live a sustainable development lifestyle, and we'll get into what sustainable development is, in order to maintain the global temperature within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Does that sound like I'm speaking a foreign language? I used to say that 10 years ago, like going to these conferences, it was like mind-boggling, and yet, after going to them, it starts to make sense, just as a new language does, but it does not make sense because they know, and you could find this out in Mark Morano's book too, you could read more about it, that they know that even if you took away all our cars, and you limited human society to a very basic lifestyle, they know that it would not make a difference in the climate. They admit it. And so why are we still going along with this? Why don't we stand? Why do we let them take over every aspect of our lives? You know, when I was reading LaVoy's book, he said something in the book that to me just stood out. He said, let me find it here. He talks about, I've flagged his book a lot, so this is why I'm having trouble finding things. He talked about how they were going to control every aspect of our lives, from what we eat, to what we drive, to what we wear. This is true. This is what United Nations Agenda 21 is all about. So I went to so the Paris Agreement is about controlling human beings, monitoring and surveilling, and they even talk about monitoring and surveilling every human activity such that they can control it to maintain the Earth's temperature within 1.5 degrees Celsius, in other words, like 3 degrees Fahrenheit, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So let me ask you this. If you got out of your car right now and said, you know what, today I'm going to quit driving, do you think you'd make a difference of the global temperature on planet Earth?
No.
Do you think if you combined all the people in the world and you got them out of their car and you made them walk, bike, and take public transportation everywhere they go, that it would make a difference in the global temperature?
No.
Not empirically possible.
That's another thing. China is not part of the agreement. So how is that? They got a pass in the agreement, so tell me, how does that make sense?
Continent Africa got an agreement too.
What?
They don't have, Continent Africa, they got an exemption for life, basically.
So I guess the continent of Africa got an exemption for life. I don't know that for sure, but I'm not saying you're not right. I just haven't verified it for myself. I went to Malaysia back earlier last year. This is the United Nations Habitat 9 conference. It was called Cities for All. The goal of United Nations Agenda 21 is that all people live in cities. Why?
Control.
We know that. And they say it's because living in cities makes us more resilient. Living in cities makes us safer. These are just a few of the reasons that they come up with. So these are the United Nations Police, and this is my niece who just graduated from college, and for her college graduation she said, you know, can I go with you? And I said yes, and here's what I want to say. The day before we left for the conference, back in February of 2018, my niece's roommates, which there were 7, were asking us about this conference that we were heading off to. And my niece, as I explained and said it was the United Nations, they were like, oh cool, that's so cool. And I'm like, no, it's really not cool, but you know, I'm going because I believe the American people deserve the truth. So as I shared a little bit more about what the conference was about, my niece started to get embarrassed. In fact, it was clear to me that I was an embarrassing aunt to her. And she went to bed, and her roommates continued to ask me about Agenda 21 and United Nations, and I get a text from my niece saying, knock it off. And then I get a text saying, knock it off now. And I walked out of the house and went to my RV, and I, with tears in my eyes, and the next morning we left for the UN conference, Habitat 9. On the last day of the conference, my niece decided to go to one of the meetings, and it was perfect. For years and years, I've been trying to convince my nieces and nephews what is going on, and they kind of just go, yeah, glaze over. They know something's wrong, they're just not that interested. But let me tell you, when she heard from the United Nations themselves that their goal is to get everybody out of their cars, that's what perked my niece's ears. We get back from the conference, I speak right away in Los Angeles, and my niece showed up for the first time when I have spoken, you know, at least 10 times before in her neighborhood. And she showed up and said, you know what, I'm so proud of my aunt, I haven't been listening, and now I'm listening. So when you touch somebody with something, a subject matter that really matters to them, in other words, don't give up, keep trying, because someday they'll see this for themselves. And so, I've been around the world. This was at to interview people. This was at Sundance, and this year, 2 years ago. And Mark, are we set up? sound?
Sound?
Yeah, we are.
Well, chop, chop.
No, we're not. If I can get a sound person to help me with this sound here.
Are you
Climate change is real. You're going to see extreme weather, temperature.
This is a vote against the future, and the future is still going to happen. And I think you had a bunch of scared and terrified older white people voting for what they thought was right, and you can't discredit them. That's what democracy is. But I think the future is coming, and the future is female, and the future is nasty, and the future is black, and the future is Latino, and the future is inclusive, and the future is going to win out ultimately, and that's what's coming.
You gave me everything and
Here's another one.
Climate change is real. You're going to see extreme weather, temperatures. You're going to see you're starting to see animals and fish in the ocean that are not normally in certain areas. Polar bears are on little icebergs that are almost invisible. So we can't deny climate change. It's real. We just need to learn how to all deal with it and come up with a good solution together.
By the way, it's snowing in Sundance, and people are going around the Hollywood. You know, this is studded with Hollywood types. And people are going around with their big furry boots, real leather coats, talking and saying they're vegan and that there's global warming going on. So it's quite hilarious. And I've also confronted Al Gore a couple times.
Love it.
Inconvenient.
Oh, great. Thank you.
You know what? My friends make fun of me about the 10-year tipping point. What do I tell them?
Well, we've got to keep working.
Okay. As he gets into his SUV. Daniel Webster said, if all my possessions were taken from me with one exception, I would choose to keep the power of communication, for by it I would soon regain all the rest. We have tools that we can use to communicate people about the lies that our children and that the world is being told about man-made global warming. And these details have been there all this time. What's been happening, Agenda 21, even though LaVoy just started hearing about it, Agenda 21 has been around since before 1992. And yet, why is it that in the last, 5-10 years, we've been hearing about sustainable development? Don't you find it fascinating that over 20 years ago, sustainable development was a created thing by the United Nations in their document called Our Common Future, right here. This book was written in the 1980s, and yet it took 20, 30 years for us to start hearing about this thing called sustainable development. We still have the power of communication to share with people the truth. Whether it is our God-given natural rights, you heard her call us a democracy. Are we a democracy?
No.
What is democracy?
mob rule.
Mob
Majority rule.
majority rule. Consensus says 97% of scientists. You get it? Let me show how easy it is to get lost in the details and not even see them. Can you read this sentence with me together? A bird in the bush, right? How many think it says a bird in the bush? You missed the detail, right? But now that you see that second the, you can never, ever unmiss that detail. How about this? FedEx. This is my favorite. Because you know what? Tomorrow you're going to see, or later on today, you're going to see a FedEx truck. And I use this all the time. Why? Because once you see the detail, once you understand the detail, you can never, ever, ever unsee it. Right? How many knew that there's an arrow in the FedEx logo, and it's purposeful? The CEO, Fred Smith, when they remember, it used to be Federal Express, for those of you who are old.
Yep.
And when they did a company redo and transform the logo, Fred Smith wanted something in the logo to represent what FedEx does. What does FedEx do for the world? It forwards things, right? So there's the arrow. So the next time you see FedEx, you can never unsee that arrow. It's as plain as day, isn't it? So let's get into Agenda 21. In 1992, October 2nd, it was a Friday night, 9:11 p.m., no joke. Nancy Pelosi was on Capitol Hill doing this.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 353, concurrent resolution expressing the sense of the Congress that the United States should assume a strong leadership role in implementing the decisions made at the Earth Summit by developing a national strategy to implement Agenda 21 and other Earth Summit agreements through domestic policy and foreign policy.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H-Con Res. 353, expressing the sense of the Congress that the United States should assume a strong leadership role in implementing the decisions made at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. I now yield to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Pelosi, the sponsor, to explain the resolution.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. In fact, it is a very simple resolution, which the gentleman has just mostly explained. The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint, Agenda 21, for global environmental action. H-Con Res. 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. We must make the promise of Rio a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from...
What did Nancy Pelosi just say that she was going to create? A climate crisis, something. Like a consortium of people, a climate crisis, I can't remember that third, and make it a priority. So she's the author, H-Con Res. 353, that was, I haven't taken Common Core math yet, so what's that, how many years ago is that? So let me read what Agenda 21 is. And this document comes after President Clinton. So first of all, 1992, who was president? George Herbert Walker Bush, who talked about a new world order, right? You can see videos online. Next, in 1993, Clinton and Gore created Executive Order 12852 is what it is, 12852. That's the President's Council on Sustainable Development. This document, called Agenda 21, the Earth Summit Strategy to Save Our Planet, edited by Daniel C. Tars, who was appointed to this President's Council, introduction by U.S. Senator Paul Simon, says this: effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action. Give me a human action right now that you're partaking in.
Breathing.
Every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision making at every level. Okay, so let's talk about collective decision making. Is universal health care, is that a collective goal? In other words, Obamacare is about the collective good, is it not? So now, under that kind of healthcare system, is it my business that you smoke? If we're all in it together, and we all have skin in the game, and we're all paying into it, is it my business where you live? If you live way out in rural America and you get hurt and an ambulance is going to have to go out there, isn't it going to cost more money to go get you out there? So under a collective system like that, your business is now my business. Do you like that future? The successful implementation of the far-reaching, it says, actions proposed by Agenda 21 will require active participation by people throughout the world at the local, national, and global level. How many times do we hear, act global, but keep it local? You see it all the time. Farmers markets.
Earth Day, baby.
Earth Day is part of that.
That's what they started with your kids maybe 25 years ago.
This is the future of energy. That is a California condor getting spliced and diced, and this is happening all the time. Do you hear about that when it comes to sustainable development?
No, they let you kill 30,000 eagles now.
Sustainable development is this, and this is as defined by the United Nations. It's also defined this way by the United States Geological Survey. Now remember, Executive Order 12852 that I just read, it was an executive order, the President's Council on Sustainable Development. That meant that every government agency, whether it was the Bureau of Land Management, the Department of Interior, constitutional or not, must follow Agenda 21. I hear all the time, Agenda 21 is a voluntary action. That is a lie. That is another lie. It was implemented into every federal agency back in 1993 for the next 10 years. In addition to that, an organization called ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. Are you guys in ICLEI City? I know Portland is. Portland signed a memorandum of understanding with ICLEI. ICLEI is a German-based non-government organization who's supposed to help, and many California cities are in ICLEI, what we call ICLEI City. Many cities, so what your city is doing is signing an agreement to count your greenhouse gases, your carbon emissions, and work with ICLEI to reduce your greenhouse gases. When your city signs on to that initiative, onto the MOU, and if you read the ICLEI's charter, it says this, Charter 1.7 principles. The association shall promote, in other words, your city shall promote and ask its individual members to adopt the following Earth Charter principles to guide local action. The Earth Charter, do you know what the United Nations Earth Charter is? Have you read it? But your cities have signed on with this. The Earth Charter is to replace the Ten Commandments. It's to replace the U.S. Constitution. It is based on environmentalism, radical environmentalism. But our cities signed on to it. So sustainable development, as defined, are these three things. If you are a sustainable company, your company must follow these three principles. Social equity. What's social equity? Everybody's equal. I'm sorry. I don't have the muscles that some men have, and there's jobs that men are going to be able to do that I'm not going to be able to do. Is that the truth? So to make an even playing field, is that possible? No. It's not possible. Okay. Economic justice. What's economic justice? Has anybody heard recently that New York wants to redistribute wealth? Environmental justice. What's that? My dad used to work for the state of California Open Space Planning. He worked for Jerry Brown when Jerry Brown was governor the first time around. There was a... My dad recalls conversations about rocks having rights. And I asked my dad, did you ask the rocks about that? Environmental justice is rivers have human rights. How many heard about the New Zealand rivers having human rights? The economic, social, and environmental aspects of any action are interconnected is what sustainable development means. So next time you hear the word sustainability, even though many people think, oh, it's to make things last longer, this is the true definition in the 21st century. And this is what a sustainable development city looks like. In fact, this is in China. And when I got back from Malaysia, I flew through China to check out Shanghai for myself. The city that they kept saying was, you know, the shining city on the hill, like the state of California at these conferences. They use California and China as their future, as the example for what is sustainable in the future. It is high rises, walking, biking, taking public transportation everywhere you go. For many years when I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, when I was running for Congress, we fought the One Bay Area plan the clue in that being 101 counties, or 9 counties, 101 cities, all using the same general plan. So the thing about the United States was that it was built on this thing called natural rights, right? On ownership. And they knew, our founding fathers knew, that in order to make, society better, society had to be responsible for itself, first of all, and take care of its neighbors. It was based on this system where you wanted to work, you wanted to get ahead. And I believe that is why, for so many of us, we missed this thing, this detail called United Nations Agenda 21 back in 1992 when Nancy Pelosi tried to push it through. Also at the Malaysia conference was this thing called surveilling and monitoring. How do you make cities safe in the 21st century? You create a monitoring and surveillance system.
5G system, China, baby.
This book right here, called The Global Biodiversity Assessment, it's a little bit easier reading than LaVoy's book, let me tell you. Talks about Agenda 21. This is what I call their Bible. And this is what it says about the planet, the environment, and monitoring and surveilling. Accelerating rates of biodiversity loss and the signing of international agreements such as the Convention on Biological Diversity and Agenda 21 have called for the world's biodiversity to be inventoried and monitored. Everything to be inventoried and monitored, including you. Yet to date, so few organisms have been collected and named and their distributions recorded that the scale of this task is enormous. When they wrote this document right here, which is their Bible, they'd only studied 3 million species, and they said that they had 18 million more to go. Remember, it's about biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, human beings building homes in rural America that's causing the salamander to disappear, supposedly. At this conference, we heard how surveilling and monitoring human activity, what does Jerry Brown want to do, my former governor? A satellite to track pollution. Who's the polluter? 24/7. In this world, simply building a home on a couple acres is degradation, is pollution to the planet. You are hurting some species, some plant, something with your single-family home. With this surveilling and monitoring system, you could see, it's just like on your cell phone now. With Facebook, they do facial identification. Look at right here. This guy. In Malaysia, that is his social security number up there. His gender, his address, or how do I say that? California just banned the word in legislation. We can no longer use he or she. Has to be they. They. So anyway, you can see, so what they do, the next level, and I did interviews with these guys, the next level of this monitoring, surveilling in the 21st century based on environmental degradation and being a good human being and a safe human being in a resilient city is they tie you to your vehicle. So the other thing that comes up, and this is just in its infancy, although in Beijing it's not. This is Beijing. And on it's Shanghai. On every corner there are surveillance cameras. And we're talking 40, 50, 60 surveillance cameras that they say that the goal eventually that is that in 7 seconds you can be arrested for doing something. In China, they have a happy citizen mark, where if you're a good global citizen, you get happy marks. And now they're going to base it on renting. So if you are a good, happy global citizen and you get these happy marks, you can rent. The goal of Agenda 21 is this, regionalism. You wonder why the border is such a big issue. It's not just because of voting. It's because if you're pushing a one world government system, it's not about putting up borders, it's about decreasing them. And regionalism, which Hitler tried to do, is about can get their sustainability merit badge. When I found this, I called Boy Scouts of America several times. I got hung up on several times. And I said, why are you quoting the United Nations? The United Nations does not believe in private property. Why? Because under their system in the 21st century, private property is unfair. Why? Because not everybody can own private property. And remember, this is about a future of limited resources. So I shared with the Boy Scouts of America my concern, and they hung up on me. I called back and I asked to speak to the manager or whoever was in charge. And what he told me is go back to our website and read it. And I said, I am reading it right now. And I said, it sounds like you need to go back and read your website yourself because you are quoting the United Nations. He hung up on me and told me never to call back again. So I did. But anyway, in order to get your sustainability merit badge, this is what you can do. You go home, you take a list of what your family has bought, what they've consumed. You go back and you talk to your scout leader about what your family has bought, what they do in the evening, and you strategize on how to share with your family all their unsustainable ways, like maybe you should not be watching TV tonight, you should be playing a guitar, and they coach you on how to have conversations with your family and tell your family that, maybe we shouldn't be using these things. So that's how you can get your sustainability merit badge. Here's a Common Core reader that I love. I won't wear lipstick if it'll make you feel better, Mom called up the stairs. What's wrong with lipstick?
Petroleum.
I heard petroleum.
Dead whales.
Petroleum and methane producers. Livestock byproducts go into lipstick. Petroleum goes into lipstick. According to the United Nations, the three and other groups who are pushing Agenda 21, they don't call it Agenda 21, they call it the 2030 Agenda, the New Urban Agenda. Those are some of the names you'll hear going forward. According to the United Nations, there are three things that are detrimental to planet Earth and are destroying it. Methane, livestock, carbon. Do you know that your bones are carbon?
Yep.
Have you thought about a carbon tax? And going carbon free? So, methane, carbon, and petroleum, fossil fuel. Do you know that almost everything we're touching right now has all three, actually everything we're touching has all three of those products in it? Livestock, petroleum, and carbon.
Y'all just got to die off.
So if we're going to go fossil free, can you tell me what that future looks like? Because that's part of Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, is that your cities are fossil free and that you have a carbon tax. Anybody want to describe what that future is like? Yes, sir.
In your state, you've been doing carbon cap and trade.
Yep, we have.
Your state has, in the last 3 years, could generate $25 billion. It means they're going to jack your prices on energy based on your square footage of your house. Based on the normal uses they think that you should be using in your house.
That's right.
And at the same time, here's a good example. Right there in Fontana, California, where I grew up at. I'm just on that state, 26 years. The situation is this. My foster mom has a 2,200 square foot house, raised us 7 foster kids in that household. Normal guys, before Obama came in office, the normal electric bill was basically $60 a month. Her bill right now is $225 a month. But because she's 98 years old and subsidized, it's $85 a month. Because we got to make sure we also help uplift from the bottom up.
Yeah.
The mentality.
And
they want to control what you do.
They say this is going to help the poor. Do you see how a carbon tax is going to help the poor? Do you see how raising energy rates is going to help the poor? Moving us to solar and wind turbines only in the state of California, how is that going to help the poor? It's not. And it's not going to help anyone else either unless you can afford to live in that kind of system. This is not about the haves or the have-nots. This is about, getting us all to go into this one world system. And it is a one world system. It's where everybody has the same climate action plans from China all the way to the United States of America and everywhere in between. Back to this Common Core reader. Your children are being taken, as many of you know. And I'll only drink half a cup of coffee, Dad said, but Judy could hardly hear him over the grinding of the rainforest coffee beans. What's wrong with the rainforest, Amazon rainforest? They're saying that cattle ranchers are now, have been deforesting it for cattle. Her family sure knew how to ruin a perfectly good Mr. Rubbish mood. She put on her jeans and her what? Spotted Owl t-shirt. Isn't it amazing that just recently the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, because it's not about game anymore, it's about rewilding, has stated that it actually was wrong about the spotted owl and putting a moratorium on forests. They've now admitted that the barred owl is mating with the spotted owl, and so therefore we must destroy this barred owl in order to save the spotted owl because they were breeding and the population of the spotted owl was declining. She clomped downstairs at a mad at your whole family move, kind of like how I'm feeling right now. Here's your lunch. Mom, it's in a paper bag. How many have heard that California has banned its plastic bags, and if you want to buy a plastic bag, and I know Boston, Massachusetts just did this. Let me ask you, when you go to a grocery store and you're buying a toothbrush, what is it made of? Your food safety. What do they cover food with? Why? Because it makes it safe, right? I kind of gave that away. So let me ask you this, and I do this all the time at grocery stores. It drives my mother crazy. In California, I always get asked, do you want a bag? Do you want a paper bag? Do you want to buy a bag? And I say, no thank you, I do not want a government bag. And then I'll say this, so you want me to buy a bag? Well, it's not my law, but it's the government. Okay, the government wants me to buy a bag, a plastic bag or a bag, for all these things coming down that you're going to scan that's all plastic or made of plastic or has plastic cover, and then I'm supposed to stick my plastic card into your plastic card credit taking machine to pay for my plastic bag when I'm going to go out on the pavement, hop in my car, and all of that is made with fossil fuel. So how is it that me buying a bag is going to make any kind of difference at all? And they cannot answer the question. But let me tell you, it brings up conversation with the cashier and everybody in line. In fact, the Walmart, yes, I do shop at Walmart. Why do I say with that with shame? Because Walmart is one of the big organizations, companies pushing Agenda 21. But now when I go to Walmart in my local rural town, they know who I am. Oh, here's the plastic lady. Don't you get it? They cut down trees to make paper bags. Trees give shade. They help control global warming. We would die without trees. They make oxygen and help. This is what children are being taught. Who said, he alone who owns the youth gains the future? Hitler said that. And this is, I get asked every year to go teach a college class on regional governance. Look what's happening. And Mark talked about this a little bit with your cooperative federalism. Regional governance is part of that problem. So, regional government, an area-wide structure for local governance designed to replace multiple jurisdictions. What gives you power as an American citizen right now? Your ability to vote. And vote for a representative who you can stand behind. This system, regional governance, takes that all away. And we have that map where regions are. Because if your local jurisdiction is taken away, then what do you have? A system that is heading towards a global governance system. And the youth are being used in this. How much I know I'm like... Am I out? Okay. Let me do this. I'm on slide 30 of 73. There you go. What is happening is what I saw. What our future is what I saw at the United Nations conference I just got back from. Did anybody hear about the Trump administration talking about the multiple uses, the mixed use of energy, and the youth rose up and were protesting, and you all heard that it made the news. I was there, And they did. They were yelling and screaming. Most of them Americans. And they're young people telling the Trump administration, shame on you. Followed by keep it in the ground, in other words, fossil fuel. And then saying, you stole our land. There's a movement called, look up stolen land, and read about it. They were using the children. This is the Katowice choir. This was in Katowice, Poland. After telling the children that unless they live a sustainable development lifestyle, the Pacific Islands, including Hawaii, would be underwater. So they had these kids singing with them. And of course you see the masks. She's a professional German singer.
I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. Since you took your life away, the sky is red and full of desire. I need air to breathe everywhere for you and me.
I need air to breathe everywhere for you and me. And in the background were videos of floods and droughts and all sorts of things happening, and children, crying, and it's maddening, you guys. And if we do not, the headlines are that climate change deniers should be jailed, and it's not just, the people, the usual people. It's Mitt Romney, the Pope, it's a whole bunch of people. And their goal is to limit our lifestyle. They call it limits to growth. Their goal is a carbon tax. Put a price on carbon. Everything you're touching, your carbon. And it's based on this whole thing called man-made global warming and biodiversity. In fact, even in this document, it says that a reasonable estimate for an industrialized world, when talking about population, is 1 billion people. Because the dietary habitats of you and me, meat eaters, is unsustainable for planet Earth. All these things are considered unsustainable. Ski runs, dams, power line construction, private property. This is all in their document. I'm not making this up. And then there's policy being passed everywhere, all over the United States, where people, farmers, ranchers are being shut down, whether it's for water or biodiversity, or in Yosemite, where they're going to take out the historic ice skating rink for river restoration. What does the ice skating rink, which is way off the river, have anything to do with river restoration? It doesn't. But yet, and then California, of course, we have the largest dam destruction project in worldwide history, and yet you don't hear about it in the news very much. You're going to hear that they approved it. It's a lie. It's a lie, and it's based on the coho salmon. They want to send 20 million cubic yards of pollutants down to the ocean. How is that saving planet Earth? It's not. It's about an agenda to destroy yet another world community. So here's what I have to say. And I'll just get to the end here. Everything we use is livestock byproduct. Everything. And as a rancher, I think LaVoy would absolutely love this. Glue, soap, anything that sticks, asphalt, sheetrock, the chairs, everything that we're touching right now was brought to you by livestock. It is impossible to be vegan or vegetarian, and yet you're going to see a massive movement towards Meatless Mondays. It's coming. And taxing people like LaVoy or my parents who have cows to the point where we can no longer afford to be on our own land, just like LaVoy was saying. So as these people go around and with the media behind them, your petroleum. Do you know that a pacemaker is made with petroleum? lives are saved with petroleum, but they want to do away with us, using petroleum.
Population control, baby.
It is about population control. They admitted it, and I'm mad as a mother bear. Daniel Webster said our destruction, should it come at all, will be from another quarter. He says, from the inattention of the people to the concerns of their government, from their carelessness and negligence, I must confess, I apprehend some danger. I fear that they may place too implicit a confidence in their public servants. Have we done that?
Yeah.
And fail properly to scrutinize their conduct, that in this way they may be made the dupes of designing men. I don't know about you, but I sure feel this way. We are either Americans or Americans. LaVoy in his book talked about how they're going to control everything down to what you eat, where you live, what you wear, what you drive. And it's happening. Do you all see it? So the question is, are you going to sit or stand? I know LaVoy would be standing today, and he would be encouraging you now, knowing that he only had so much time to live. He would encourage you now to live now. And I think LaVoy lived freely, openly, wildly, in a good way, to his very last breath. And I'm so honored that he gave me a couple of precious things, including his wife's friendship. And the ability to see even more how much we're in danger. LaVoy talks about an EMP, he talks about a nuclear bomb, and the electricity going out. I talk about sustainable development, wind turbines, solar panels, and let me tell you, that energy source is intermittent, unreliable. And if that's what we're hanging our future on, we're in big trouble. So I invite you to read LaVoy's book, because it's phenomenal, and it will open up your eyes. And I invite you to, purchase the books and the DVD that I have back there, blue, and $5 towards that. It's just, I have it at cost, $20 for the book, $15 for the video, and $5 per whatever goes to LaVoy's, Jeanette's case. And I invite you to do this because this is so much fun. Educate, communicate, but do not hibernate. And the polar bears are doing just fine. I have that book here too, by one of the leading polar bear scientists in the world. And she says the polar bears are doing great. So thank you for having me. Sorry,